Your finger is already on the switch. The man in the white coat does not shout. He does not threaten you. He just says, "Please, continue." From the next room, another man has already begged you to stop. He has said his heart hurts. He has gone silent. And somehow, the scariest part is not the machine. It is how normal the room still feels. There is a desk. There is a clipboard. There is a label that says Yale University. There is a calm adult telling you that the experiment must go on. So you look at the switch. You look at the man in the coat. And you do the thing you thought you would never do. You obey. That is why the Milgram experiment still feels dangerous. Not because it proved that people are evil. That is too easy. Evil people are comforting, because you can decide you are not one of them. The frightening idea was different. Stanley Milgram wanted to know how ordinary people could become part of terrible systems. Not in a movie. Not with evil music. Not with a villain explaining the plan. Just a room, a rule, an authority, and one small step after another. In the early 1960s, Milgram brought volunteers to Yale. They thought they were joining a study about memory and learning. That was the cover story. The volunteer became the teacher. Another man became the learner. The learner was strapped into a chair in another room. Wires were attached to his arm. It looked real. It was meant to look real. But the learner was not really another volunteer. He was working with the experimenter. The shocks were not real. The fear of the teacher was... In front of the teacher sat a shock generator. 30 switches. 15 volts. 30 volts. 45 volts. Higher and higher, all the way to 450. The labels grew darker as they moved across the panel. Slight shock. Moderate shock. Strong shock. Danger. Severe shock. Then the final switches were marked with 3 X's. The job sounded simple. Read word pairs. Test the learner's memory. If he makes a mistake, press the next switch. Every wrong answer means a stronger shock. At first, it almost feels like a weird school task. Wrong answer. Click. Wrong answer. Click. Then the voice from the other room starts complaining. He says the shocks hurt. He says he wants out. He mentions his heart. He refuses to answer. Then, after a certain point, he stops responding at all. This is where most people believe they would stand up. You believe it too. You picture yourself pushing the chair back. You picture yourself saying, "No." You picture the clean version of yourself, the one who always knows where the line is. But the experiment was designed to make that line move. Not by much. Just 15 volts at a time. That is the first trap. The situation does not ask you to become cruel all at once. It asks you to continue what you already started. You pressed 15, then 30, then 45. So when the next switch appears, your brain does not ask, "Are you the kind of person who harms someone?" It asks a smaller question. Is this switch really so different from the last one? That smaller question is where obedience hides. Before the experiment, Milgram asked people to predict what would happen. Most believed almost nobody would go all the way. Psychiatrists expected only a tiny fraction to reach the maximum. The real result was worse. In the best-known baseline version, 40 men took part. 26 went to the final switch. 450 volts. That is 65%. Every single participant went past 300 volts, the point where the learner had kicked on the wall and stopped answering. This is the number people remember. 65%. It sounds like a verdict. It sounds like someone measured human weakness and wrote the score on the board. But the number alone can mislead you. Because many of the men were not calm. They sweated. They trembled. They laughed nervously. They argued with the experimenter. Some asked who would be responsible if the learner was hurt. This matters. They were not always enjoying obedience. They were often suffering while obeying. That is the part that makes the experiment more useful and more disturbing. You can feel that something is wrong and still keep going. You can dislike the action and still perform it. You can look like you are choosing freely while the room is quietly shaping the choice. The man in the coat had no weapon. He could not arrest anyone. He could not take the money back. He could not legally force the teacher to continue. His power came from something softer. He represented the study. He represented Yale. He represented expertise. He represented the rule of the room. And when the teacher hesitated, he used short prods. Please continue. The experiment requires that you continue. It is absolutely essential that you continue. You have no other choice. Notice what those sentences do. They do not explain the learner's pain. They do not answer the moral question. They move attention back to the procedure, the experiment, the requirement, the essential task. The person in the next room becomes a problem inside a system. The teacher becomes an operator. The switch becomes the next step. This is how responsibility can slide out of your hands without ever fully disappearing. You still press, but someone else seems to own the meaning of the press. The experimenter says the shocks may be painful but cause no permanent damage. The setting says science is in control. The script says the learner agreed to participate. The machine says the next step is already prepared. So your mind starts making deals. Maybe the experimenter knows more. Maybe the learner is exaggerating. Maybe stopping now would ruin important research. Maybe the real danger is disobeying the person who understands the situation. These may sound like excuses, but in real time, inside the room, they can feel like reasons. That is why the experiment was not just about obedience. It was about confusion under authority. Authority often works by narrowing the world. It shrinks the number of questions you feel allowed to ask. Outside the room, the big question is obvious. Should a person hurt another person because a stranger says so? Inside the room, the questions get smaller. Should the next step continue? Should the expert be trusted? Should the promise be finished? Should anyone become difficult? Should anyone be the person who ruins the study? Smaller questions are easier to answer badly, and the room gives you momentum. You have already agreed to participate. You have already taken the role of teacher. You have already read the words. You have already pressed the first switch. By the time things become serious, leaving no longer feels like doing nothing. It feels like breaking something. This is a hidden force in human behavior. People do not only obey because they are afraid. Sometimes they obey because stopping would create a new identity. The difficult person. The disobedient one. The one who ruined the procedure. The one who refused to cooperate. For a social species, that can feel like danger. Your brain is built to read rooms. Who has status? What are the rules? What does everyone expect? What happens if you become the exception? Most of the time, this helps you live with other people. It lets traffic move. It lets hospitals function. It lets classrooms, teams, airports, and workplaces avoid chaos. Obedience is not always evil. That is exactly why it is powerful. If obedience were always ugly, it would be easy to recognize. But it often arrives wearing useful clothes. Efficiency, order, expertise, professionalism, policy, protocol. The dangerous moment is when those useful things begin to cover up a human cost. The Milgram experiment has also been criticized for good reasons. Participants were deceived. Many experienced extreme stress. The right to withdraw was made harder by the experimenters' pressure. Later, psychologists and ethicists argued over whether the knowledge gained could justify what the subjects went through. That debate matters, because a video about Milgram should not turn the participants into props. They were real people placed in a powerful situation. The lesson is not that they failed so you can feel superior. The lesson is that the situation was stronger than most people expected. And that should make you less smug, not more hopeless. Because once you understand the machinery, you can notice it sooner. You can notice when a request comes wrapped in authority but has no moral explanation. You can notice when a system turns a person into a number. You can notice when responsibility is being passed upward while action is being pushed downward. You can notice the phrase that hides inside many bad decisions. Just following orders. That phrase does not belong only to laboratories. It belongs to offices. It belongs to institutions. It belongs to platforms. It belongs to any place where a small action can be separated from its human result. Click this. Approve that. Reject this person. Report that name. Follow the script. Keep the line moving. Most modern switches do not say 450 volts. They look cleaner. A button, a form, a dashboard, a policy, a message from someone above you. That is why the experiment still follows you. Not because your life is a laboratory, but because authority still knows how to enter a room quietly. It rarely says, become cruel. It says, be reasonable. It says, be professional. It says, this is standard procedure. It says, everyone does it this way. And if you wait until the final switch to ask what kind of room you are in, you may have already trained yourself to press. So, the real question is not, would you have been one of the 65%? That question is tempting. It lets you perform a heroic version of yourself. The better question is harder. What would you need in the room to help you stop? A clear rule that says no order removes your responsibility. A habit of asking who is affected. Permission to pause. Another person willing to doubt with you. A private line you decide before the pressure begins. Because courage is not only a feeling. Sometimes it is a structure you build before the room gets confusing. Milgram's experiment does not prove that you are bad. It proves that you are influenceable. That is not an insult. It is the price of being human. You are shaped by rooms, by titles, by uniforms, by experts, by routines, by the desire not to make trouble. The danger begins when you pretend you are not. Your finger is already on the switch. The man in the white coat may not be there. The machine may not have labels. The voice from the other room may be hidden behind a screen. But the question is the same. When the room tells you to continue, will you notice who pays the cost?